7 Palestinians have been killed today after the Israeli army shelled a house in the north of the Gaza Strip. 4 children and an elderly man were among the dead. The Israeli army says it's investigating the incident. However, the latest deaths have added to the increasing number of children being killed as a result of Israeli operations. On Saturday, a 14-year-old girl was killed after the Zionist states bombed her house. Daniel Adam has the latest on Gaza, and viewers are advised that his report contains disturbing images.
Only yesterday it was home to a family of 6, but today it looks more like the aftermath of a battle. According to locals, the residents of the home were victim to Israeli shelling. All 6 family members were killed, including 4 children. Now neighbors have come to clear up. As locals cleared the house, the bodies of the dead were being brought to Beit Hanun's local hospital. None of the 4 dead children were older than 5. An elderly man was killed instantly, and medics tried to revive the mother of the children, but she didn't make it. Elsewhere, a Palestinian fighter was killed in an exchange of gunfire with Israeli forces, bringing the number of dead in Gaza today to 7. An Israeli spokeswoman confirmed that they were carrying out operations in the area, but said no houses had been targeted. The deaths have only added to the growing list of Palestinian children killed by Israeli forces. On Saturday, a 14-year-old girl was killed after her home was hit with a missile. Meanwhile, the Fatah-appointed Palestinian Prime Minister for the West Bank, Salam Fayyad, condemned the latest Israeli operations.
التامة لكل هذه الأعمال الهمجية التي ترتكب بحق أبناء شعبنا في غزة وشكل يومي ودائم تنال الأطفال والأبرياء وتدمر وتقتل. ماذا يمكن لنا أن نقول إلا أن ندين بشد العبارات.
But condemnation from Palestinian officials isn't likely to force Israel to halt its military operations in Gaza. So far, the Zionist state has ignored calls for a truce made by Gaza's Hamas authorities. It says the Islamist group who govern Gaza aren't serious about their offer. It's also Hamas's refusal to recognize the Zionist state and the launching of attacks by its fighters on Israel's southern towns, which Israel says justifies their near-daily operations. However, it's those activities that have seen an increasing number of civilians killed over the past few weeks. Daniel Adam, Islam Channel News.
While frequent Israeli attacks in the Gaza Strip are not the only problem Palestinians living there face, there's also the lack of food, which is now threatening to turn into a humanitarian crisis. According to the UN Relief Agency, its food aid operations may have to be suspended due to the fuel shortages in the territory. The shortages have come about after the Zionist state imposed tighter restrictions on Gaza's borders. And although Israel has promised to allow essentials to get through, the UN says it may have to stop deliveries altogether if fuel isn't provided to them by the end of this week.
There's no denying that life in the Gaza Strip is hard. This year, frequent Israeli military strikes into the territory have claimed the lives of scores of Palestinians, many of them children. But now, according to the United Nations Relief and Works Agency in Gaza, the situation is about to get much worse. UNRWA has warned that it may be forced to suspend food aid distribution altogether due to the lack of fuel for its trucks. And for many of the residents of the Gaza Strip, it's a move that will have dire consequences.
مدام الوكالة وقفت المساعدات على الشعب الفلسطيني لقيت احنا حنموت بالبطيء. احنا لقيت عملوا فتحوا حماس، احنا بدنا يصلحوا فتحوا حماس حتى يعملوا لنا حل للشعب الفلسطيني. هذا مش معاملة، يعني كل واحد من عنده ناسب قضية اللاجئين.
اللي احنا بنعرف ان وكالة القدس اصبحت نفذ الوقود عندها، ومن خلال نفاذ الوقود اصبحت خدماتها اليوم معدمة تماما في قطاع غزة.
But these Palestinians have been here before. Only last week the UN made similar warnings, only for that emergency to be averted shortly after. Now Palestinian petrol suppliers are doing their best to avert a humanitarian crisis that will eventually follow if UNRWA were to shut down its operations in the area. They hope to get enough fuel to allow an emergency shipment of aid by the end of this week, but it's still unclear whether they'll be able to do so. Israel says its blockade of Gaza is aimed at the Hamas government, which doesn't recognize the Zionist state. Israel says it was forced to tighten the border to prevent fighters from Hamas's military wing from entering into the territory. Since Hamas took full control of the Gaza Strip in June, defeating the forces of its rival Fatah faction, Israel's imposed increasing restrictions on the Strip. It's been condemned for what the international human rights group have called measures to cut off its 1.5 million population from the rest of the world. And although Israel has pledged to allow humanitarian aid to continue its flow into the coastal territory, it seems that lifeline may soon be cut if UNRWA's calls for help aren't listened to. Hariel Haddad, Islam Channel News.
Israel today opened a key checkpoint in the occupied West Bank, partly easing heavy travel restrictions around the town of Nablus. Israel said troops had completely removed the checkpoint, allowing Palestinian vehicles and pedestrians to move freely between Nablus and the village of Asira al-Shamalia. However, the village mayor says the checkpoint isn't being completely removed, but merely opened for traffic to pass through between 6 a.m. and 10 p.m. Israel has more than 500 checkpoints, roadblocks and barriers across the West Bank, which it says are necessary to protect civilians living in Israel.
يعني شعور أي مواطن بتسهل عليه تنقلاته، بتسهل عليه حركته، بتسهل عليه قضاء حاجاته. يعني احنا كنا في الماضي بنلف لفة طويلة حتى نوصل.